The deal closed at $3 million. Nathan's voice sliced through the conference room like a blade. Applause broke out. Everyone clapped and beamed. Everyone but me. Because while they celebrated, I felt something sink. Not once had my name been mentioned. And I was the one who built that deal from the ground up. Let me take you back. Before the smiles. Before the silence. Before I understood just how easily loyalty could be erased. I'm Diane Keller. For the past 14 years, I've worked as a senior strategy lead at Meridian Edge, a supply chain analytics firm in St. Louis. I'm 53 now, not the loudest voice in the room, never one for office politics. I just did the work, and I did it well. The Clean Logistics project had been mine from day one. Nearly a full year of meetings, revisions, and red-eye flights. I gave up holidays, missed my anniversary dinner, even postponed a knee surgery just to push it across the finish line. This wasn't just business to me. It was the culmination of everything I'd spent my career building. That's why I brought that pen. An old brass Mont Blanc, slightly tarnished. My dad gave it to me when I got my first managerial role. Use it for something that matters, he told me. I plan to use it today to sign a new bonus contract, maybe even a formal acknowledgement of my role. Instead, I sat quietly as Nathan Grant, our newly appointed CEO, soaked in the spotlight, grinning and basking in the applause like he'd brokered the deal himself. The project was secured, the client thrilled, but I was invisible. And then came the knife. Nathan turned to his right and said, "Going forward, the project will transition under the guidance of our new associate director, Claire Benson." Claire. She'd only been with us for a month. Polished, fashionable, and utterly unqualified. No experience in operations, no background in logistics. But I had noticed the long glances, the private lunches, the way she seemed to skip every rung of the corporate ladder. She smiled like she'd earned it. I smiled too, but mine. That wasn't joy. That was restraint, because I wasn't shocked. I was calculating. What Nathan didn't realize was this: clients don't build trust with titles. They build it with people. And I was the one who had earned that trust. They had no idea what they just triggered. I could feel my palms go cold under the table. I gripped the old brass pen inside my purse like it was the only thing tethering me to the moment. Because this wasn't just some oversight. It was calculated erasure. I was being pushed out clean and quiet. I didn't say a word during that meeting. Not out of weakness, but because I knew something Nathan didn't. Clients don't invest in spreadsheets. They invest in people, in reliability, in consistency, in trust, and I was the one they trusted. When the meeting ended, I walked calmly back to my office, not crushed, but sharper. I wasn't going to plead for recognition. I wasn't going to start a fight. I was going to observe. I was going to prepare. And then, when the moment came, I would show them exactly what happens when you gut the soul of a project and expect the system to keep ticking. I sat at my desk for a long time after. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I simply stared at that pen, once a symbol of growth and trust. Now it felt like a souvenir from a past life. There was no memo, no meeting follow-up, just the slow spread of whispers across the floor that afternoon. Claire was now the official face of the Clean Logistics Initiative. And I didn't exist. Still, I kept working. Responding to client emails, finishing handoffs, not out of duty, but because I needed time. Time to measure the depth of the betrayal, and more importantly, to see who was in on it. That evening, I reached out to someone in HR unofficially. Her name was Tasha, someone I had mentored during her internship nearly a decade ago. We met for coffee near the plaza, tucked away from the buzz of the office. She looked uneasy. "Diane," she began quietly. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Nathan's been pushing this restructuring idea since day one. He keeps saying he wants a younger strategic vision." His exact words. I raised an eyebrow. "So this isn't about performance?" She hesitated. "No, he's calling it a leadership realignment. And he's adjusting the budget to match, including the incentives I asked." Tasha gave a reluctant nod. "He wants the Clean Logistics payout reclassified as a team achievement. No individual bonuses, In other words, I was being written out of the reward by design. No individual bonuses. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about pushing me aside. It was about deleting my name from the record entirely. Nathan didn't want to reward the person who actually built the deal. He wanted to rewrite the story, one where he and Claire could pose as the visionaries. That night, I drove home through the empty streets of St. Louis in silence, the kind of silence that carries the weight of too many unspoken things. My daughter Jenna was waiting up for me. She's 20 now, sharp-tongued and sharper-witted. She handed me a mug of chamomile tea and studied my face. "You look like someone just tried to erase you," she said. I gave her a small smile. "They're trying." She tilted her head. "Let me guess. New boss took credit, and someone with good shoes and no clue got the praise." I blinked. "How do you know that, Mom?" "That's corporate. Seen it with Dad, seen it with friends. It's not new." I chuckled, though it sounded hollow in my chest. She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't ready to become someone's corporate casualty. Not yet. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I pulled up my original contract. I went through every clause with a fine-toothed comb. I backed up all my emails with the client. I organized every timeline, every draft, and every meeting recap I'd ever taken. If they wanted to erase me, they'd have to climb over a mountain of paper first. What Nathan hadn't calculated was this: people like me don't vanish. We document, we prepare. And when the time is right, we strike. That afternoon, while I was filing final handoff notes, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Ellen Myers, Senior VP of Strategic Development at Red River Logistics. The client. The one behind the $3 million deal. I answered. Her tone was firm, deliberate. "Hi, Diane. I just received a confusing update from your company. It says you're no longer involved with the clean logistics rollout. Is that accurate?" I swallowed hard, clutching the pen in my hand like a weapon. "Yes," I said softly. "That's true." A pause on her end. Then she said, "Well, I have a problem with that. I think you and I need to meet. Off the record." The next morning, I arrived 10 minutes early at the cafe she chose, tucked away from boardrooms, buzzwords, and cameras. Just the way I liked it. She arrived 5 minutes early, on purpose, not by chance. "Diane," she said, with warmth sliding into the booth across from me. "I'm glad you agreed to meet." "So am I," I replied, though my stomach had been twisted in knots since the call. Ellen didn't waste time on small talk. "I need to ask you something." "Directly," she said, leaning forward. "Did you step away from the clean logistics project voluntarily?" I shook my head. "No, I was replaced." Why I hesitated. There was no polished way to explain it. "Because I'm not part of the story Nathan Grant wants to tell," I said finally. She sighed sharply, almost in relief. "That's exactly what I suspected." Then she said something that nearly made me drop my coffee. "We signed that contract because of you." I blinked. She continued, steady and measured. "You built the trust. You solved the prototype issue. You flew out to Kansas City last minute to talk our compliance team off the ledge. Nathan, Claire. They weren't anywhere near that room when it counted." I sat there stunned. That Kansas City trip had nearly wrecked my immune system. I'd been running a fever, popping Tylenol just to stay functional. I hadn't told anyone. Now, hearing her acknowledge that it was too much. Too real. "I'm not just angry," Ellen went on. "I'm insulted. They sent me a new liaison last week, Claire. She couldn't explain basic deliverables." She kept tossing out buzzwords like vertical synergy and cross-platform dynamics. It was embarrassing. I let out a soft, breathy laugh. That sounds exactly like her. Ellen's tone softened. "I've seen this too many times. Women like you do all the heavy lifting, but when it's time to stand on stage and cut the ribbon, someone else is handed the scissors. It's exhausting." Her words struck deeper than I expected, because she was right. This wasn't just about me, it was about every woman who had been told to step aside just as the credit came due. I felt a slow burn rise in my chest. Not shame, not defeat, just clarity. "So, what?" Now I asked, keeping my voice steady. If Diane's journey resonates with you, make sure to subscribe and join our community because the next chapter is just around the corner and you won't want to miss the powerful truth that unfolds. Ellen leaned back thoughtful. I want to offer you something not out of sympathy, but because I'm a businesswoman. I need someone who's competent, invested, and already knows my systems inside and out. She paused. I want you to join Red River as an independent advisor. You'd work directly with our integration team? She smiled. Same compensation. Maybe even more. I stared at her speechless. Independent, not through Meridian, I echoed. That wasn't just a job offer. That was a shift in power. I started, but Ellen lifted her hand gently. Take a few days? I know it's a lot, she said. But Nathan made a critical mistake. He underestimated how loyal clients can be, especially when they're treated with respect. I nodded slowly. Thank you, Ellen. Really. That means more than I can say. As we stood to leave, she placed a hand on my arm. Sometimes the best revenge, she said, is simply being seen. Her words lingered as I walked back to my car. The sting of the boardroom, the humiliation of being replaced, the nights I'd spent buried in work, they all began to take shape. Not as defeat, but as something stronger. Resolve. I sat in my car, staring out at the parking lot. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I smiled. For the first time in days. That night, I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Plan B. Inside it, I compiled everything I had from the Clean Logistics project. Emails, memos, timelines, technical briefs. Every deliverable I had touched. Within an hour, the pattern was undeniable. I wasn't just involved in the project. I was the project. They hadn't tried to replace me. They'd tried to erase me. And that realization struck like a match to dry kindling. The next morning, Claire swept past my office, radiating manufactured confidence. Her pencil skirt was sharp, her heels louder than her experience. She glanced sideways like she'd already claimed my seat. She couldn't have been more wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, not Ellen's. Someone else. The call rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Naomi Trask, she said briskly. Naomi. We'd crossed paths in my early consulting years. She was sharp, no nonsense, and now held the title of Senior Compliance Officer at Greyhawk Partners, one of Meridian Edge's largest investors. Hi, Naomi. I need 15 minutes and your discretion. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You never call unless something's on fire. I'm listening. I laid it out calm, clear, and without drama. The project, the sudden replacement, the attempted erasure, and most importantly, the rising concern from Red River's leadership. Naomi didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. Well then, she said, that explains a few things. Let me make some calls. And just like that, another piece of my quiet war locked into place. No drama, just facts. The project, the replacement, the blatant attempt to strip credit, and the most critical detail of all the clients' growing dissatisfaction. You're telling me Meridian's risking a $3 million rollout with Red River so they could replace the deal lead with? What a LinkedIn profile in heels, Naomi said, voice sharp. That's the short version, I replied, jaw tight. She let out a low whistle. That's not just reckless. That's corporate malpractice. Naomi didn't offer a fix. She didn't have to. I knew exactly how her world worked. She just needed to ask the right questions during her next quarterly review with Meridian's board. And if I knew Naomi, and I did, those questions were already forming. When we ended the call, I leaned back and closed my eyes. I wasn't moving from anger anymore. I was moving with purpose. The next 2 days passed in a strange calm. I performed my duties like nothing had changed, all while watching for the quiet sparks I'd lit to catch fire. Then Wednesday morning hit. At 6:07 a.m., an email landed from Nathan Grant. Team, this week's departmental check-in is postponed. We'll reschedule. Postponed. That man loved those meetings. They were his soapbox, his spotlight. Canceling one without warning meant something had him rattled. Later that day, a ping popped up from Tasha in HR. Tasha, internal. Only something's up. Naomi Trask's name came up in the boardroom this morning. You didn't hear it from me. I stared at the message, then smiled. Too soon. Too smooth. And yet, so satisfying. But what came next? That part turned my stomach. At 3:14 p.m., I received a company-wide forward. Claire Benson had been officially appointed Strategic Vision Liaison for the Clean Logistics Project. Strategic Vision Liaison. What does that even mean? The announcement was laced with PR gloss praising her bold insight, fresh energy, and this part burned her deep involvement since the project's inception. What she'd been with the company 3 weeks. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. Too bold, too obvious, too insulting. Up until then, I'd played the long game. But this was rewriting the record in real time. Fine. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one. That evening, I sent a single-line email to Ellen Myers. You may want to review today's announcement regarding Claire Benson's appointment, specifically the section about her credentials. Then, I opened a new draft. This one addressed not to Ellen, but to someone else entirely. Not to a client this time, to an old friend. Years ago, I helped her prep for a panel at the Midwest Women in Logistics Leadership Summit, hosted in partnership with the Wall Street Journal. Since then, she'd moved into PR and now worked for one of the most read B2B tech newsletters in the country. If Meridian Edge wanted attention, I was happy to give it to them on my terms. By Friday morning, the ripple had become a wave. I woke to 3 new messages, 2 from former colleagues I hadn't heard from in years, and 1 from Ellen Myers. Short, direct, thank you. I'll take it from here. And take it she did. By 11:00 a.m., word was already swirling on the executive floor. Ellen had requested a full audit of the Clean Logistics contract, specifically targeting the credentials and timeline of Claire Benson's so-called involvement. She hadn't just emailed her account manager, she'd copied 2 legal partners, 3 corporate attorneys, and most damning of all, the procurement integrity officer assigned to the Red River account. Nathan's careful little fiction unraveled one email at a time. And Naomi, she'd done her part too. Greyhawk Partners, Meridian's primary financial backer, called for an emergency performance risk evaluation with the board. I didn't need to be in the room to know how it went, because that afternoon, Tasha from HR messaged me. Tasha, internal only. Victor looked like someone dumped cold coffee in his lap. Wish I could have filmed it. It was almost poetic. Later, I stepped out for air and happened to pass by the break room just in time to hear Claire's voice sharp and cracking under pressure. They're coming after me like I did something wrong. I didn't lie. Nathan told me to say I was part of it from the start. Then silence. Too late, Claire. You wore a role that didn't belong to you and it never fit. I walked by without a glance, but oh, how deeply satisfying it was to see the unraveling begin. The real shockwave, though, didn't come from a boardroom. It came from a blog. Tech Pulse Strategy weekly published a feature titled The Invisible Architects of Innovation. The heart of the article. An anonymous story about a woman replaced mid-contract by someone with the right image, but none of the substance. The client, it said, refused to proceed unless the original project lead was reinstated. It closed with a quote, "Corporate memory fades." But clients remember who shows up for the hard parts. My phone buzzed for hours. LinkedIn mentions comments, DMs, stories like mine, and the voices of women who had stayed quiet until now. Too common, too powerful to ignore. Later that evening, my daughter Jenna found me at the kitchen table, still scrolling through my phone. "Mom," she said, grinning wide, "you broke LinkedIn." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. I felt lighter, like I'd reclaimed something that no one else had the right to take from me. My own story. But with every strategic move, there's always a counter. On Monday morning, I received a calendar invite. No message, no explanation, just this urgent Diane Keller, 10 a.m., executive conference room. Organizer Nathan Grant. I dressed with care, putting on the same navy blue blazer I wore the day I signed the Red River contract. The day I'd made the deal real. Nathan was already seated when I entered, flanked by 2 board members. And of course, Claire Benson. She looked pale, frayed around the edges. Her confidence had finally cracked. Nathan didn't waste breath. Diane, we're concerned about certain perceptions surrounding recent events. We thought it best to clarify the record. I smiled calm and composed, happy to help. Would you like me to walk through the project I led, or the silence I maintained while others claimed the credit? A pause. Nathan's jaw twitched. Claire stared at the table. One of the board members, a silver-haired man I didn't recognize, leaned forward. Ms. Keller, would you be willing to share your documentation related to the Red River engagement, would I? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder perfectly tabbed and organized. Of course, I said. Transparency is in everyone's best interest. He began flipping through the pages with steady, analytical eyes. Meeting logs, draft revisions, email summaries, development milestones. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The documentation spoke for itself. The timeline was watertight, the evidence irrefutable. Nathan sat stiffly, fingers interlaced, lips drawn into a thin line. Claire hadn't moved. I kept my voice level. Every design sprint, every compliance hurdle, every client call, I logged it all. Not because I expected a fight, but because I believe in accountability. I paused. This wasn't accidental. I wasn't overlooked. I was removed. Deliberately. There was a long silence. Then the board member turned to Nathan. Mr. Grant, why were these records not disclosed when we requested project leadership confirmation last week? Nathan cleared his throat. We were still reviewing the structure. It was corporate speak, for we hoped no one would check. But someone had. And now, the lie had nowhere left to hide. A laugh nearly escaped me. Reviewing the structure that was corporate speak for, we were hoping no one would dig too deep. But they had. And now, it was far too late. One of the other board members, a woman I'd worked with briefly during a cross-departmental initiative a few years back, spoke next. Nathan, were you aware of Ms. Benson's lack of relevant credentials before assigning her to lead the Red River engagement? Nathan hesitated, then answered with a half shrug. She's learning, and her perspective brings the kind of energy we've been missing. That was it. The boardroom fell silent. The air chilled, too vague, too dismissive, too tone-deaf for a room full of people holding evidence. Then the older board member, the one who had reviewed my documentation, turned toward me. Ms. Keller, he said slowly, if we were to formally reappoint you as the strategic lead on the Red River project, would you accept? My chest tightened, not from nerves, but surprise. After everything they were offering the role back, I took a breath. No, I said, voice steady. The client has already asked me to work directly with them, and I intend to honor that. I glanced around the room. I'm not interested in a seat that only became available after public pressure made silence impossible. The words landed hard like a dropped gavel. Nathan's face flushed. Claire didn't dare look up. But I added, softening slightly, I'm willing to support a professional transition on my terms to ensure the project's success. I care more about the outcome than the optics. That part had always been true. The board members exchanged quiet looks. Then the woman from earlier nodded. We respect that, Ms. Keller, and we appreciate your integrity. She turned toward Nathan. We'll be initiating an internal review of executive project assignments, effective immediately. Translation: Nathan was standing on very thin ice. As I rose from my chair, Claire finally looked at me. Her eyes said what her mouth wouldn't regret, or maybe just shock that the illusion had collapsed. But it was too little. Too late. I walked out of the boardroom feeling lighter. Not smug. Not vengeful. Just clear. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't schemed. I hadn't thrown anyone under the bus. I had simply told the truth and waited for it to do what truth always does when it has space. Expose. Correct. Rebalance. That evening, my phone rang. It was Ellen. You handled that beautifully, she said. Did I? I asked, half smiling into the quiet. Oh yes, quiet power is still power. Diane, Ellen said softly. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I truly believed it. 2 weeks later, I stepped into Red River Logistics' downtown office, not as a vendor or a desperate former employee hoping to reclaim a stolen seat, but as a trusted advisor with a contract that bore only one name at the top: mine. There was no fanfare, no red carpet, just quiet recognition, and a new desk near the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the St. Louis skyline. It was more than enough. Ellen greeted me with that knowing smile again. "This feels right," she said, handing me a welcome folder. "It should have always been this way." I nodded silently. It just took a long, winding road to get here. The first days were steady, honest, and productive. I met engineers, marketing leads, and finance teams. Not once did I need to assert authority. They listened because they remembered. They trusted me because I had earned that trust, not demanded it. Back at Meridian Edge, the aftermath continued to unfold. Nathan Grant was quietly transitioned out, replaced with a vague press release full of corporate jargon and euphemisms. Claire Benson resigned a few days later. No one was surprised. Then, I got a note from Tasha in HR. "They thought you'd disappear quietly. Instead, you stood firm and let the truth echo." That line stayed with me because I hadn't waged war. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't threatened or burned bridges. I had simply refused to be erased. One afternoon after a team session, a junior analyst approached me. Early 20s, nervous but wide-eyed. "Ms. Keller," she said softly, "I read that Tech Pulse article. I think it was about you. If it wasn't, it still felt like it was." I smiled. "Maybe it was. Maybe it was about all of us," she said. She nodded. "I just wanted to say it gave me courage." That moment meant more than any title ever could. I had always believed loyalty mattered, that showing up every day and doing the work was enough. But sometimes silence isn't strength, it's permission. And when a system is built to silence the right voices refusing to disappear, becomes the most radical act of all. Have you ever been sidelined for something you built with your own hands? Have your quiet efforts been overlooked, taken for granted, or worse, rewritten by someone louder, but far less deserving? If so, you're not alone. Across countless offices, boardrooms, and factories, stories like Diane's are more common than we realize. People who show up every day, who work late nights, who sacrifice personal time, all to build something meaningful, only to be pushed aside when it's time for recognition. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And this is the place to share it. Tell us your experience in the comments below. How did you handle being erased or overlooked? Did you find the courage to stand your ground like Diane did? Or are you still searching for your path forward? By sharing your story, you can empower others who feel invisible or undervalued. Because quiet strength is powerful. It's resilience without noise. It's courage in the face of erasure. And most importantly, it's a reminder that being overlooked doesn't mean you're insignificant. It means you're ready to rise. So don't stay silent. Don't let your efforts be forgotten. Speak up here. Be heard. Together, we can change the narrative. We can show the world that integrity and persistence matter, that loyalty is worth fighting for, and that true power isn't just in the spotlight. It's in the quiet moments where you keep going even when no one's watching. If you found Diane's story inspiring, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of workplace injustice and quiet triumph. And ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Because these stories aren't just entertainment, they're lifelines for anyone who's ever felt invisible at work. Thank you for watching. And remember, your story matters. Your strength matters. And together, we are unstoppable. If you've ever felt invisible at work, sidelined, despite your hard work and dedication, I want you to know you're not alone. Sharing your support means the world to me and to others who've been through the same. Drop a comment below telling me your story, or simply send words of encouragement. Your voice can lift someone else up, just like Diane's story lifted me. Remember, loyalty and quiet strength are powerful. Don't let anyone rewrite your legacy or diminish your efforts. Stand firm, keep pushing, and trust that truth has a way of shining through. Life isn't always about loud victories. Sometimes it's about the steady courage to hold your ground when no one's watching. So support each other here, learn from these stories, and apply that resilience in your own life. Together, we can make sure quiet strength is never mistaken for weakness.